The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, jolting me from the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks. My phone's shrill ring cut through the silence of my studio apartment like a blade, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Nothing good ever came from calls at this hour. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But the number on the screen made my blood run cold. First National Bank's Fraud Department. Miss Elena Vasquez? The voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of concern that made my stomach drop. Yes, this is Elena, I managed, sitting up in bed and fumbling for the lamp. This is Patricia Wells from First National's Fraud Prevention Unit. We're calling about some unusual activity on a loan account associated with your Social Security number. Are you currently applying for any large loans or lines of credit? My mouth went dry. No, absolutely not. What kind of activity? A business loan application for $200,000 was submitted yesterday using your personal information. The application shows approval pending, but our automated systems flagged it for review due to the amount and some inconsistencies in the documentation. The room seemed to spin. $200,000. I barely had $200 in my checking account. There has to be some mistake. I haven't applied for anything. That's what we suspected. Can you confirm your current address for me? I rattled off my information, my mind racing. Who would do this? Who even had access to my Social Security number, my mother's maiden name? All the personal details needed for something this elaborate? Miss Vasquez, I need to inform you that if this is indeed fraudulent, you'll need to file a police report immediately. In the meantime, we're freezing all accounts associated with your SSN and placing fraud alerts with the credit bureaus. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had stolen my identity to secure a loan worth more than I'd make in 3 years at my job as a veterinary technician. The violation felt physical, like someone had reached into my life and twisted everything familiar into something dangerous and unknown. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Instead, I pulled up my credit reports online, my hands shaking. As I entered my information, what I found made me physically ill. The loan application was there, all right, along with 3 new credit cards I'd never opened and a car lease for a BMW I'd never seen. My credit score had dropped 200 points overnight. But the worst part was the address listed on the applications, 425 Maple Street, the house where I'd grown up. The house where my parents still lived with my younger brother, Marcus, 25 years old, charming, irresponsible, and perpetually in financial trouble. Marcus, who'd been between jobs for the past 8 months while pursuing his dream of becoming a social media influencer. Marcus, who had access to all my childhood documents in Mom's file cabinet. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the loan documents. The signature looked eerily similar to mine, practiced, confident strokes that could only come from someone who'd been forging it for a while. How long had this been going on? How many smaller frauds had I missed? By the time the sun rose, I'd documented everything. Screenshots, printed emails, notes with timestamps. I called in sick to work and drove straight to the police station, my evidence folder clutched in my lap like a lifeline. Officer Rodriguez listened patiently as I explained the situation, occasionally asking clarifying questions while typing notes into his computer. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with kind eyes that didn't judge when I admitted my suspicions about my own brother. Identity theft by family members is more common than people think, he said gently. It's also more devastating. Because of the personal betrayal involved. Are you prepared for the consequences of filing this report? What do you mean? If we investigate and find evidence that your brother committed these crimes, he'll be arrested. Identity theft of this magnitude is a felony. He could face years in prison. The weight of it hit me then. I wasn't just protecting myself, I was potentially destroying Marcus's life. But then I thought about my destroyed credit, the $200,000. Debt that would follow me for years, the violation of having my most personal information weaponized against me. I'm prepared, I said, signing the report. The drive to my parents' house felt like driving to an execution. I'd called ahead, telling Mom I needed to discuss something important with the whole family. Her voice had been cheerful, oblivious, asking if I wanted her to make my favorite enchiladas for dinner. Their house looked exactly the same as always, a modest two-story colonial with Mom's carefully tended garden and Dad's workshop visible in the garage. The normalcy of it made what I was about to do feel even more surreal. Marcus's BMW, apparently the one he'd leased with my stolen identity, sat in the driveway like a neon sign advertising his guilt. It was silver, sleek, and worth more than I made in a year. My beat-up Honda Civic looked embarrassed beside it. Mom answered the door with a smile that faded when she saw my expression. Mija, what's wrong? You look terrible. Is everyone here? Your father's in the living room, and Marcus is upstairs. Let me call him down. The next few minutes felt like being trapped in amber. Mom bustled around making coffee while Dad asked about work, and Marcus eventually appeared, looking rumpled and slightly hungover. He avoided my eyes, which told me everything I needed to know. I need to talk to all of you about something serious, I began, pulling out my folder. Last night, I got a call from the bank about fraudulent activity on my credit. The color drained from Marcus's face, but he said nothing. Someone used my social security number to apply for a $200,000 business loan, open 3 credit cards, and lease a BMW. I looked directly at my brother. The same BMW that's sitting in your driveway. The silence was deafening. Mom's hand flew to her throat, and Dad set down his coffee mug with a sharp clink. That's impossible, Mom said weakly. Marcus wouldn't, Mom. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. I can explain. The confession came out in a rush. He'd started small, using my information to open a credit card for emergencies while he was job hunting. When that went well, he opened another. Then the car lease. The business loan was supposed to be his big break, seed money for an app development company. That would make us all rich. I was going to pay it all back, he insisted, tears streaming down his face. The app is brilliant, Elena. It's going to revolutionize how people connect with local businesses. I just needed capital to get started. With my money, I said coldly. Without my knowledge or consent. Dad, who'd been silent throughout Marcus's confession, finally spoke. How much are we talking about total? I consulted my notes. Including the credit cards and the car lease, about $250,000. Mom gasped. Dad's face went ashen. Okay, Dad said slowly, in the tone he'd used when Marcus crashed the family car or got suspended from school. This is fixable. We'll figure out a payment plan. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. This isn't fixable with a family meeting and a payment plan. This is identity theft. This is fraud. This is a felony. Elena, please, Mom pleaded. He's your brother. We're family. We don't send family to prison. Family doesn't steal from family. Either, I shot back. But Marcus did, for months, while sitting at your dinner table and pretending everything was normal. Marcus looked up, his eyes red and desperate. I'll go to the bank tomorrow. I'll confess everything and work out a repayment plan. You don't have to involve the police. It's too late for that. I already filed a police report this morning. The explosion was immediate. Dad's face turned red, Mom started crying, and Marcus looked like I'd physically struck him. You did what? Dad's voice was dangerous, quieter than a shout but somehow more frightening. I protected myself, which is what any rational person would do when they discover they've been the victim of a crime. He's your brother. Mom wailed. How could you destroy his life like this? How could he destroy mine? I countered. Do you have any idea what this does to my credit score? My ability to get loans, rent apartments, sometimes even get jobs? He didn't just steal money, he stole my financial future. Dad stood up, pacing to the window. There has to be a way to undo this. We'll call the police, tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was calculated, systematic fraud that went on for months. But he's family, Mom repeated, as if that magical word could erase felony charges. So am I said quietly. But that didn't stop him from victimizing me. It didn't stop any of you from assuming I should just absorb this loss to protect him. Marcus finally found his voice. Elena, please. I'll do anything. I'll get a job, 2 jobs. I'll pay you back every penny with interest. Just, please don't let me go to prison. For a moment, looking at his tear-streaked face, I almost wavered. This was Marcus, who used to build blanket forts with me and sneak me extra cookies when Mom wasn't looking. But then I remembered the violation of seeing my name on loan documents I'd never signed, the sick feeling of realizing someone I trusted had been systematically dismantling my financial life. You should have thought about consequences before you committed the crimes, I said. Actions have consequences, Marcus. You're 25 years old. It's time you learned that. The argument that followed was brutal. My parents accused me of being vindictive, cruel, and disloyal. They painted Marcus as a victim of circumstance, a dreamer who'd made some poor choices but didn't deserve to have his life ruined. They begged, they pleaded, they tried guilt, anger, and everything in between. Through it all, Marcus sat silent, finally understanding that his charm and puppy dog eyes couldn't fix this. The enormity of what he'd done was sinking in, and with it, the realization that there would be real consequences. Fine, Dad said finally, his voice ice cold. If you want to destroy this family, that's your choice. But don't expect us to forgive you for it. I'm not the one who destroyed anything, I replied, standing to leave. I'm the one trying to survive what was done to me. As I reached the door, Mom called out one last desperate plea. Elena, please. What if we all pitch in? Your father and I could take out a second mortgage, maybe take early retirement distributions. I turned back, seeing clearly for the first time how deeply dysfunction ran in my family. You would bankrupt yourselves to protect Marcus from the consequences of stealing from me? He's our son, she said simply. And I'm your daughter. But apparently, that counts for less. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, family drama, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding my financial life. Marcus was arrested, exactly as Officer Rodriguez had warned. The evidence was overwhelming: forged signatures, fraudulent applications, fabricated business documents. His revolutionary app turned out to be little more than a half-baked idea and a hastily designed logo. My parents hired an expensive criminal defense attorney, draining their savings account in the process. They stopped speaking to me entirely, treating me like I'd betrayed them rather than been victimized by their son. Extended family chose sides, with most falling into the family should protect family camp, but something unexpected happened in the midst of all this chaos. I discovered I was stronger than I'd realized. The bank, once they understood the full scope of the fraud, was remarkably helpful. The loans were discharged, the credit cards canceled, and my credit score began its slow climb back to normal. It would take time, but the damage wasn't permanent. More importantly, I learned to value myself enough to demand justice rather than accepting abuse for the sake of family peace. I'd spent years mediating between my parents and Marcus, making excuses for his behavior, and enabling his irresponsibility because it was easier than confronting the dysfunction. 3 months later, Marcus pled guilty to avoid a trial. He received 2 years in minimum security prison and 5 years of probation, during which he'd be required to make restitution payments and undergo financial counseling. It was less than the maximum sentence but more than my parents had hoped. The day before his sentencing, he called me from jail. Elena? His voice was small, defeated. What do you want, Marcus? I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I hurt you. I never thought about how it would affect you. I just saw numbers on a screen, not my sister's life. It was the first time he'd taken full responsibility without trying to minimize or excuse his actions. I know, I said quietly. But sorry doesn't undo the damage. I know. I'm going to pay you back, Elena. Every penny, with interest. It might take years, but I swear I'll do it. We'll see. And Elena? Thank you. For what? For not letting me get away with it. For caring enough about my future to make sure I faced consequences. I know that sounds crazy, but I needed this. I needed to hit bottom before I could start climbing back up. After he hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about accountability, family, and the difference between love and enabling. Real love sometimes meant allowing people to face the natural consequences of their choices, even when it was painful. 6 months after that horrible 3 a.m. phone call, I had a new apartment, a restored credit score, and a family that still blamed me for choosing justice over blind loyalty. But I also had something more valuable, the unshakable knowledge that I would never again sacrifice my well-being for someone else's comfort, even if that someone shared my DNA. Marcus wrote to me regularly. From prison, letters full of genuine remorse and detailed plans for making amends. I read them all but didn't respond. Forgiveness, I'd learned, was a process that couldn't be rushed, and trust had to be rebuilt slowly, through consistent actions rather than eloquent words. My parents eventually reached out, tentatively, awkwardly, as Marcus's release date approached. They'd come to understand, through painful experience, that their enabling had helped create the monster that had victimized their own daughter. It was a hard lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. The last I heard, Marcus had been accepted into a work release program and was making steady payments toward his restitution. He'd also started attending meetings for gambling addiction, finally acknowledging that his entrepreneurial spirit had really been a series of increasingly desperate bets with other people's money. As for me, I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always make you popular, but it always makes you stronger. Some battles are worth fighting, even when, especially when, the opponent is someone you love. The 3 a.m. phone call that had started this nightmare had actually been a gift. It had forced me to confront a toxic family dynamic I'd been enabling for years and taught me that self-respect isn't selfish, it's essential, and sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to save them from themselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.